Hey there everyone, it's Scurvy back again with another video, and it's going to be a little different today considering the title, as you've probably read it. We're going to be going over Plato's Cave. We're going to be reading it in its entirety, and then going over some symbolism of it that can be applied today. So, without further ado, let's get started. Socrates. And now, I said, let me show you in a figure how far our nature is enlightened, or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground den, which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the den. Here they have been from their childhood, and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move, and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning round their heads. Above them, a fire is blazing at a distance. Between the fire and the prisoners, there is a raised way, and you will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show puppets. Glaucon, I see. And do you see, I said, men passing along the wall, carrying all sorts of vessels, and statues, and figures of animals made of wood, and stone, and various materials, which appear over the wall. Some of them are talking, others silent. You have shown me a strange image, and they are strange prisoners. Like ourselves, I replied, and they see only their shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave? True, he said. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? And of the objects which are being carried in like manner, they would only see the shadows. Yes, he said. And if they're able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Very true. And suppose further that the prison had an echo which came from the other side, which they would not be sure to fancy when one of the passers-by spoke, that the voice which they heard came from the passing shadow. No questions, he replied. To them, I said, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. That is certain. And now look again and see what will naturally follow if the prisoners are released and disabused of their error. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck round and walk and look towards the light, he will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which in his former state he had seen the shadows, and then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion, but that now, when he is approaching nearer to being and his eye is turned towards more real existence, he has a clearer vision. What will his reply be? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass and requiring him to name them. Will he not be perplexed? Will he not fancy the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are now shown to him? Far truer. And if he is compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have pain in his eyes which will make him turn away to take in the objects of vision which he can see, and which he will conceive to be in reality clearer than the things which are now being shown to him? True, he said. And suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent, and held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself. Is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all, of which are now called realities. Not all in a moment, he said. He will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world, and first he will see the shadows best, next the reflections of men and other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the light of the moon, and the stars, and the spangled heaven, and he will see the sky and the stars by night better than the sun or the light of the sun by day? Certainly. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of him in the water, but he will see him in his own proper place, and not in another, and he will contemplate him as he is. Certainly. He will then proceed to argue that this is who he gives the season and the years, and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way, the cause of all living things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. Clearly, he said, he would first see the sun and then reason about him. And when he remembers his old habitation and the wisdom of the den and his fellow prisoners, do you not suppose that he would felicitate himself on the change and pity them? Certainly he would. And if they were in the habit of conferring honors among themselves on those who were quickest to observe the passing shadows and to remark which of them went before, and which followed after, and which were together, and who were therefore best able to draw conclusions as to the future, do you think that he would care for such honors and glories, or envied the possessors over them? Would he not say with Homer, better to be the poor servant of a poor master, and to endure anything, rather than think as they do, and live after their manner? Yes, he said, I think that he would rather suffer anything than entertain these false notions, and live in this miserable manner. Imagine once more, I said, such a one coming suddenly out of the sun, to be replaced in his old situation. Would he not be certain to have his eyes full of darkness? To be sure, he said. And if there was a contest, and he had to compete in measuring the shadows with the prisoners who had never moved out of the den, while his sight was still weak, and before his eyes had become steady, and the time which would be needed to acquire this new habit of sight might be very considerable, would he not be ridiculous? Men would say of him that up he went and down he came without his eyes, and that it was better not even to think of ascending. And if anyone tried to lose another, and lead him up to the light, let them only catch the offender, and they would put him to death. No questions, he said. This entire allegory, I said, you may now append, dear Glaucon, to the previous argument. The prison house is the world of sight. The light of the fire is the sun, and you will not misapprehend me if you interpret the journey upwards to be the ascent of the soul into the intellectual world according to my poor belief, which, at your desire, I've expressed whether rightly or wrongly, God knows. Probably more like gods know, but, translation errors. But whether true or false, my opinion is that in the world of knowledge, the idea of good appears last of all, and is only seen with an effort, and when seen, is also inferred to be the universal author of all things beautiful and right, parent of light and of the Lord of light in this visible world, and the immediate source of reason and truth in the intellectual, and that this is the power upon which he would act rationally, either in public or private life, must have his eye fixed. So, that was pretty interesting. Now let's get to my analysis of this allegory. So, after listening to all that, you're probably asking, hey Scurvy, how does this translate into modern times? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'll be the one to answer that. So, I first want to explain the symbolism of the story, starting off with the prisoners. The prisoners are primarily young men, although there's also some young women who are also in this cave as well. For the shackles, we have the phone. Primarily the phone. Although for some of us, it is the computer screen, but for the vast majority of, normies, so to speak, it's certainly the phone. It is so easy to get basically anything you want with it, and also, the amount of times I see people just completely glued to their phone, it's crazy. I see it quite a bit at the gym, especially with some of the younger people there. All I really use my phone for is music and maybe to talk to, my parents or some friends of mine. That's about it. Next up, we have the shadows. So, they look exactly like humans. They're no longer little puppets dancing in the wind or something that people are animating. The shadows are basically human in all but organs and shit. What I mean by this is that they're not real, but at the same time they are real. So that's just a shorthand explanation of the symbolism in the story. I think it's also fair to say that the cave itself is no longer just a simple cave. It has a very functional door, and it has a whole lot of other tech and high-tech stuff too. The cave has become a paradise of some sort. You get all the amenities you want, minus some really weird stuff like rock climbing walls, but you get all the food you want, provided you have DoorDash or Uber Eats and you have the money for it, or you live with your parents like I do currently, although that's going to be changing soon for me. But the question then comes, if you have everything, You're able to talk to people online instead of having like real friends and all that. You're able to get entertainment at a fingertip. Is there really a reason to leave? And that's where I've come to the conclusion. There's no real reason to leave this cave. For young men like myself, what do we really have to look forward to by the time we graduate college or we're in the working world? Well, if you want to get married, good luck with that. And if you want to have a family, good luck with that. In the modern age, there is such a law called no-fault divorce. And that has caused so many problems for marriages as a whole because women are incentivized to destroy their marriages and their families, all for some cash and prizes. Why is this bad for men? Because we no longer really have a reason to get married, and it's all the fault of feminism. That's one thing. But also, the women themselves, like, I don't know how to say this, but it's just like enough women live this hedonistic lifestyle that is driving good men away from them. And then by the time they're in their 30s, that's when they start complaining on TikTok saying, "Where are all the good men? Oh, where are all the good men?" And they never realized that the good men were always there. You never wanted them. Why? Because they were so ensconced in this hedonistic culture of just partying and getting slammed by Chad every Friday, Saturday night. I know I am exaggerating this a little, but it's very much prevalent in youth culture, which I also like to call douchebag culture. Then there's also the job market. It took me a while to find an entry-level position at the library that I work at. I mean, I know I'm just going to be there temporarily because I do have some grander ambitions, but I got lucky. I should just admit that. I got lucky. Most young men, some of their applications are completely disregarded because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just like to call those programs die programs because it's funny and it pisses them off. And if you're perceived as white, which I don't really like using terms like black or white, but it makes talking about certain things easier. But if you're perceived to be white, good luck getting a job because some unqualified person could be from the same ethnicity, could be of a different ethnicity, or some chick who's probably going to screw things up is going to take the job that you so rightfully deserved after all that training and college and possibly grad school, if you did go to grad school or if you are in grad school. And then lastly, all this stuff that I talked about, it really shows that the masculine endeavor has been destroyed. Like, owning a house, that's very expensive. Hell, when I was talking with my dad about this, he showed me a very small house in my local neighborhood. That's 200 grand. That is expensive as shit. And even though I know that librarians, like, they make decent money, it's like 200K for a small house in the state that I'm currently at? That is expensive. What is the point of buying a house when it's so expensive? It's just easier to live in my parents' place. It's also easier to just rent an apartment. And that's what a lot of other young guys do if they want to really get away from their parents. But even then, that's few and far between now. And so add that with hoflation, where, I have to work 5 times harder than my grandfather, and the women out here are 25 times sluttier than their grandmothers. Yeah, that's a problem. I don't really have good pickings to choose from, and knowing the types of chicks that are in this youth culture of hedonism and wanting more and instant gratification and all that, yeah, I could see why a lot of men are walking away from the dating market and why MGTOW is gaining such steam. Then, the cherry on top of all this, we have no reason to get married whatsoever. The laws that exist, they're not good. They don't incentivize men to get married. You might get a tax break, but yeah, she could just take that too if she ever so feels like splitting up. Ultimately, the drive of feminism, which is women wanting to be like men, is making everything worse and got us into this situation. I just said the reasons why. But also, feminist principles are directly against the development of a strong society because it is innately about hating men, especially young men. Guess who built society most of the time? It was the young men. If you get rid of their purpose in life, you're gonna have a weaker society. That is a fact. We have seen this throughout history. Strong men make for good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Hard times create strong men. You get the point. So what does this mean for us young guys? Now, I'm not going to be the one to advocate this type of lifestyle, but society often forces young guys to adopt it. And that is the lifestyle of getting our sense of progression through video games instead of actual fulfilling labor. We get our sense of intimacy through watching pornography. We also get our, source of food, through Goy Slop, Uber Eats, DoorDash. I just listed that. You could even get your groceries done on those apps now. It's a lot easier to do that anyways. And then also, yeah, you could get drugs pretty easily too. Alcohol as well. So, yeah, for some guys, they're living the dream life they always wanted to. They never really had to do anything to get it because society forced them to live this way. But for someone like me, yeah, I don't like it very much. I like the video games, but I don't really like the other stuff. The porn, the Goy Slop, the drugs, though I do like the alcohol. But speaking of me, I figure I should at least talk about my experiences being trapped in this cave before I end this video. Ever since moving to the state that I'm in right now, I've certainly become a lot more introverted, though I'm starting to come out of my shell. And honestly, the cave for me, it's something I voluntarily go back to at the end of the day, or more likely at the end of the workday. But if you've been paying attention to my other videos, you would have known that I used to have a Hinge account. You might have been watching this video, or you might have just been skipping through it to get to here. You would find out that I've actually deleted my dating app account. Why? Because it just wasn't working. Much like how it is for the average guy, those apps just don't work at the end of the day. They're full of bots, and yeah. Since then, I've started to kind of force myself to meet new people, and it's actually working out kind of well. Though conversation is difficult because of autism, I'm slowly working through it, to say the least. Basically, Scurvy's routine, it goes the following. Wake up, go to the gym, go to work, or the other way around, go to work, then go to the gym, and then I'm basically on my computer for quite a bit. And some days I go for a walk around my neighborhood. Other days I don't. There's not too many days where I don't go on a walk. And there's quite a few days that I do go on a walk. So I am getting some fresh air. And then also on some days I do like to go to Yu-Gi-Oh! Local tournaments. I've been getting back into that game for quite some time. Haven't told y'all yet on the channel because I didn't find it to be relevant until now. And so yeah, I have a nice little routine going, though ultimately it's not really solving some of the problems that I'm having with life. And I have a feeling it's not really going to change right now. I have a feeling by the time I have my own apartment when I go to grad school, I have a feeling that's when it's going to change. I often work best when it's just like, oh my goodness, I have nothing else to do. I want to get out, so I'm just going to do it. So I've actually been thinking about volunteering at like a soup kitchen or something, or like a cleanup, anything to kind of get me out of the apartment for a little bit on like a Sunday or something. That's generally like my laziest days. And I know that grad school has like a shitload of coursework to do as well, but I could probably squeeze in about an hour of volunteering time. Altruism is good in general, and I think I do want to try to be a bit more charitable in the future. But as for now, I am kind of trapped here for the time being until I hear a response from the schools that I'm looking at. Unlike a lot of other young guys, like I did not fall for the traps of pornography and Goy Slop in particular. Although with video games, I do limit myself on like how much I could play, and even then, some days I just don't play at all. Honestly, my problem is that I sit in front of the computer more, if anything, and I think when I move, that's gonna change. That's for sure. If I'm on the computer, chances are I'm probably going to be doing work or I'm going to be playing video games. I won't really have much time to scroll through right-leaning political subreddits. But back to the subject at hand here. The only time that I really play video games for more like 2 or 3 hours a day, it's the weekends or the days that I don't have work. And I like to have a little bit of rum with it. I don't go crazy with alcohol like I did back in college. That's the part about growing up. You actually learn how to control your liquor intake. But other than that, it's like I'm kind of glad that I didn't fall for the other traps that are being laid out for us young guys. But hopefully you learned something from this video. And who knows, maybe this video even inspired you to take some action. And with that being said, hope you're looking forward to the next episode of Scurvy Shit List. Although I think next week is going to be a Hearthstone pack opening, though not entirely sure. But expect a video from me next week. That's all I know. But hey, thanks for watching, and have a good one.